Good afternoon, and welcome to this June edition of Town Hall. I'm Marco Garcia.
And I'm Dave Wooten. Each month we present Cambridge Mayor Andrew Bradshaw and a rotating slate of the 5 city commissioners to address issues important to us all.
And this month we have Commission President Lejan Cephas and Ward 1 Commissioner Brian Roche joining Mayor Bradshaw here in the spatially distant WHCP studios.
Marco, in just a moment, we'll get right to their introductory remarks, but first a reminder that you can get your questions posed in the chat session, and we'll include as many as possible. We've already received a number of topics in advance from the Cambridge Association of Neighborhoods, the Dorchester Chamber and the news team at WHCP, the Dorchester Star, and the Dorchester Banner.
Thanks, Dave. Mayor Bradshaw, welcome back to today's Town Hall. What is at the forefront of your focus today?
Today, and thanks to Commission President Cephas and to the Commissioner from Ward 1, Mr. Brian Roche, who I already ran into this morning grabbing breakfast. Thank you all for having us on today. Always enjoy coming on and getting to talk about what's going on in Cambridge. I think the big things that have occurred over the course of the last month since we last spoke, the transfer of the port property is now underway to the Cambridge Waterfront Development Incorporated Group. That was the next step in an ongoing effort to see the waterfront here in Cambridge developed in a proper fashion that's going to be contributory for the citizens and also provide growth in our tax base so that we can provide services throughout the city. Really, the focus for me with the waterfront is how we can make that something that's useful for all citizens and for visitors, but to do so in a way that's contributory to the health of the city. We don't want it to be something that's going to be drag on city resources or any kind of detriment to what we provide for all the residents here in Cambridge. And I think that we now are in a position where that's going to move forward in a healthy fashion. You know, there's also some other things going on. We're seeing continued investment and continued growth. We're seeing housing sales in the city of Cambridge are going very well. We've got some housing developments that have been on the back burner in the city of Cambridge for well over a decade that are finally going online. I was gratified to see on Facebook the other day, Ryan Holmes advertising a development that was first approved, I think, by the city of Cambridge during Mayor Rippens' term back in the 2005-2006 timeframe. So been a while having that one come along, but here we are now with the opportunity to have individuals choosing to live in Cambridge, and if they want to live in a more suburban context, that will be available to them. Of course, we're also continuing to welcome everyone that's choosing to call Cambridge home in our historic parts of our city, in the historic East Cambridge and the historic West End, throughout the area along Ray Street Extended and elsewhere in the city. Also, some commercial investment going on. There's going to be a ceremony. It's tentatively scheduled for July 6th to welcome some investment in some new industrial and warehousing space in the commercial corridor along the Woods Road area, where we for so long have seen industrial investment, but that has, I think, over time seen disinvestment as companies leave and new companies don't come into place. So to see the excitement on the part of an investor to build new construction in that corridor at this time is really exciting. And, you know, as we are coming out of the COVID-19 lockdowns and all the things that we've done in regard to that to keep everyone safe. Really happy as well that the numbers in the county continue to remain very low. I think the numbers I saw last week were under 10 cases countywide. So as that occurs, you know, we have things coming up that are going to be benefited by that. Soonest will be Eagle Man this weekend, and looking forward to welcoming all the athletes back to Cambridge after a year where they were unable to come here and participate in the competition. Always contribute greatly to us from our businesses, our hotels, the excitement that comes to the city, and the notoriety that comes to us for hosting the event. So really looking forward to that, and really looking forward to now handing it over to the commissioner from Ward 1, Commissioner Roche, for his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to be here again, and just want to echo what the mayor said. However, just also talk about some of the things that are near and dear to my heart, which is improving the quality of life for citizens here in Cambridge on the back end. That's the reason they we like to live here, and it's the reason other people want to live here. And that is one of the big projects is the Rails to Trails has started. If you go down Cedar Street, just past the Feed and Seed place, or if you going down Washington Street, just past the Wawa, that rail bed, if you look to your right, where Artwell's is, you'll see that that's clearing. And that is a absolutely phenomenal accomplishment for the city of Cambridge, for the county, for the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy who helped with that, our planning department and public works department. It will be a major contributor to the success of Cambridge and making it a place that can live and get to services they need without hopping into a car. That said, I want to mention briefly, I don't want to speak for him, and I think it'll probably ought to put the proprietor of our bird scooters on WHCP at some point if he hasn't been, but I'm super excited about that project. Some of the cool things from a council perspective I want to emphasize is that there's always going to be bumps in any project like this. However, I heard from Bird that a number of those trips on scooters are being used as low-cost ways for people to get to employment. And also, one of the things we'll be able to get from that is data on where the city may be lacking in infrastructure to accommodate people that may not have cars, or people that are trying to get places without cars. So I can also speak to the Traffic and Safety Committee, who is about to do a pilot project on Leonard's Lane in front of the new Recreation and Parks building that will also be the preliminary Boys and Girls Club. Commissioner, Council President Cephas and I share that. I think I'm on one side of the road, she's on the other side of the road, but there's one thing I know, we both share a real passion for making a safe passage for just the multitude of youth that will be using that facility and come from the Conifer area, and also those developments that are online that the mayor talked about. These are things that, in my opinion, that's why we exist as a city, is we provide water, sewer. Someone else can talk about trash, but there's some positive things there, and the quality of life things for people to live here, because one of the things we can't forget is people have a choice. Many people do, on where they live. And we want to make Cambridge a place that just people find a lot of value in. And I think quality of life type things are super important to that. One of the questions on our list is the marina, which I'll let that come to play when the subject comes up. And then if I think Council President had a meeting with the trash company this week, so maybe she wants to give big picture there, but don't think that's not top on all of our list. And the opportunity here, on one hand, it's a problem, but on the other hand, it's a huge opportunity to literally go next level. It's an opportunity to provide recycling services that we control in the city, so we're not subject to outside forces, and it's also something that we're just answering the call that I know many citizens, based on a survey online, and even now, and even from 2017, a report that someone forwarded me that, trash and recycling and the ability to send brush to somewhere that it's not going into the landfill are all things that our citizens want. So we really have some high hopes for not just solving this problem, but making it better when it comes to trash. So I'll stop talking at this point, but thank you so much.
I just want to give a thank you for WHCP for making us welcome so we can have these conversations with the community, keep them abreast on current events. Special thank you to former Mayor Wooten and Marco for always making us feel at home. So I just want to say thank you. We can talk trash a little later, but just briefly, just to pick up on some of the things that Commissioner Roche was speaking on. Yes, there's most certainly a passageway or a pathway that we're working on. We're trying to connect communities, and we want to create safe pathways for pedestrians, walkers, those that are on bikes. So we can get them out of the way of the traffic that's going on the Leonard's Lane area and the Washington Street area, and and what the ultimate goal is. The goal is to connect the cattail development essentially to Cornish Park, and then somewhere down the line, maybe get the path connected someplace to the waterfront, or maybe the rails to trails, as Commissioner Roche was mentioning. But the main focus, again, it's always been the focus. It'll continue to be the focus. That's about making sure all residents are taken care of, as far as safe housing, as far as having good water, as far as having, clean air, opportunities for employment. So I'm very excited about the direction that we're going in as a mayor commission form of government. And we're just ready for these questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Let's go in. And first up, we have Mayor Bradshaw. Have you spoken about the possible need for a livability standard in Cambridge? And has that idea received further work?
So that's something that I've discussed, and that's part of, I think, a broader need that exists with housing in the city that goes along with improved code enforcement, that goes along with better rental registrations, and perhaps a tiered registration system, as Commissioner Roche and Commission President Cephas and I think probably all the other commissioners have discussed in varying discussions, with different stakeholders at different times. But ultimately, that is part of what we're talking about, and part of what we feel is necessary is a standard to say that this is what we feel is the minimum that should exist for a resident in the city of Cambridge. And that's, of course, that's clean running water. That's, shelter from elements. That's safe conditions that are not going to lead to the potential for injury within the home as a result of the condition of the home. That's also having working installed smoke detectors that meet the state standards and that are in place so that we ensure, look, Cambridge is an old city, and old cities catch fire and old cities burn. And Cambridge, thank God we've got a dedicated volunteer fire service here, because Cambridge sees a lot of fires, and they're very gnarly fires. They are not, a simple room and contents fire with, you put a couple 100 gallons of water on it and it's out. Some of the things that we see here are very devastating. And part of that is because the housing quality is subpar in some neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods where you see those emergencies occur. And it's a life safety issue. It's a health issue. And it's an issue that I think also moves beyond physical health and impacts residents' mental health as well. When you're surrounded by squalor, and when you live in a home that is dangerous to be in, it impacts you and it hurts you emotionally and mentally. And I think that's part of what we want to address. Other communities, there is a statewide minimum livability standard. I do want to point that out. And we are charged with enforcing that. But many surrounding communities, Talbot County in particular, have their own minimum livability standards that go a bit beyond the state standard in an effort to ensure that the quality of home that residents live in is of the quality that we would expect for our peers. I think what's important too with this topic to point out is that I've heard some pushback and some discussion that it would be unfair to have these kinds of standards, and with many and really most kinds of businesses, you have to meet the parameters that are required. For example, my family has a towing business. In order to tow for the Maryland State Police, you have to meet certain standards. You have to have certain levels of documentation. Your drivers can't have particular backgrounds. So it's not uncommon. In fact, it really is, I think, more common than not, that when you're in business, you have to meet certain standards, and you have to provide a certain level of service to receive the license, or to receive the authority to perform the job that you perform. And I think that when the business is housing, that's as important as anything else, because this is direct impact upon residents. This is direct impact upon families. This is direct impact upon children. And this really impacts the safety and security of the entire city. So that really is, I think, something that's of great importance. We've got the Cambridge Housing Task Force that is going through some evolution right now, because there were some members that were not showing up to meetings. And so we're trying to ensure that we've got a dedicated membership. And part of what's going to be the task of the Housing Task Force is to review other livability standards that exist elsewhere and provide recommendations back to the council. And I'll allow, I'll let the commission president or Commissioner Roche to add to that, they're both very, very, I think, strong on the housing in the city.
Well, I'll go. I would say part of the livability standard has a lot to do with the neighborhoods that you live in, which means it should be a safe neighborhood. You shouldn't have to worry about if you're going to be shot, or if you have people next to you, they're not keeping the I guess the best company. So that most certainly is and will be a part of the livability standard. And I've actually started reaching out to our city attorney as of now, and he's working on some legislation to give our Cambridge Police Department actually the opportunity to give out fines to these neighbors who essentially are the neighbors that are ruining the neighborhood. Upon conversations having like with Sergeant Patton, he was expressing to me that they can arrest someone, they get back out of jail, then it happens over and over again. So he believes as well as with some of the other police officers that that if they have the ability of issuing a fine to the landlord and I guess essentially holding the landlord accountable for this environment he or she is allowing to have in their property, they believe that would be a great tool so we can get control of our neighborhoods back again. So let's keep in mind that's part of the standard. And the other parts of livability standard is we have businesses right here in the city of Cambridge, and the way that they're operating is just so disorderly. I go to the Family Dollar just on a weekly basis, and there's always piles of trash just literally in the parking lot. You walk inside the store is trash. So it's like us as residents, we deserve better than this. And not only that, those who may decide they may want to invest in our community, like that Family Dollar store, it's located right on Route 50. Like what sort of image are we sending out there that all of the other surrounding businesses, they're tidy, they have their business in order, but we're allowing this one particular business to just be a landfill. Thank you.
So I'll add to the other two. From my focus, I spearhead the technology committee for the city, and it's not just the nerd committee. We actually, because livability and housing was such a huge issue, there's all kinds of things that you can do with technology, but ultimately you use it to solve a problem. And what we have focused on and begun to focus on is the fact that if something can be measured, it can be improved. And that's not my quote. That's actually Peter Drucker, who was this management guru historically that just found a lot of success in helping companies. So that said, what we are trying to do is we are looking at all of the data that the city has. Primarily right now, what we do know we have is code enforcement data. We have criminal activity data. Though we don't have access to it currently, the fire department has their fire call type data. And then there may be other things that we can actually measure that allow us to at least say, okay, here's where we are. And then as we issue code enforcement violations or we see increased activity in certain areas, criminal, whatever, we want to be able to see that from almost a dashboard type perspective. And then ultimately, how do you improve that? Well, so some of the ideas going around, the first step, I think, is what Council President Cephas has mentioned, which is empowering maybe the law enforcement there's particular fines in other cities that, it is breaking the law. So if you think about it, if a police officer goes into a house that looks like it's unsafe, that's actually that's a violation of the law. No, we don't want to overburden our officers. We are understaffed currently, but we're working on that. However, the ability to take that data, put it back in the system, and then how do you then reconcile the problem? Well, you reconcile the problem by incentivizing improvement. There's the carrot and the stick method, and we're tossing around some models such as what's called a tiered licensing model, that this will all come in front of the council. The community will have opportunity to have input on this. Again, we're the organization of transparency. That was one of our promises. However, these are successful models where you actually take, and instead of penalizing the whole city for a series of bad actors. You actually only penalize or incentivize bad actors to give them the opportunity to improve. So if you're doing the right thing and you're actually providing good housing, and there's feedback mechanisms where we can prove that you're doing a good job, then certainly we want to cultivate that type of investment. We want to cultivate that type of homeowner. We want to cultivate that type of business. But if you're not, there needs to be a barrier to your ability to do business in the city of Cambridge. And we just have to make sure that's not to the detriment of housing. But we'll know first and foremost if we can measure the progress or progress we're not making with a series of metrics. And this is not something that isn't done in other cities productively. So the technology committee is focused on that. So that's pretty much my 2 cents on that.
I do want to add to that too, because Brian made kind of a joke about it that some would term the technology committee the nerd committee. And, it was one of the first actions that was taken was introduction. I introduced the language for the technology committee and for traffic and safety, because two of the biggest issues I think that we see in the city are unsafe streets and a lack of use of good data-driven information to make decisions. And having a technology committee that is looking into these things, I think, is key so that we can get into the 21st century with how we make decisions as a city. That being using data, having the metrics, being able to look at a heat map and make determinations and say that this block is where this issue is occurring, that block is where that issue is occurring. Why is that? And then we can delve deeper into that in a data-driven analysis as well. So that, just absolutely, I think, key to have the folks that we do have there and the talented people that we have there. The resumes for the people that came forward for both those committees, absolutely unmatched, I think, with regard to the kinds of citizen input that we've had in citizen-involved committees previously. Just absolute talent and really thankful that we do have that kind of talent, either homegrown or choosing to relocate here because they want to be part of the solutions for Cambridge. So hugely important, and I think really over the course of time, having that technology committee and the things that they provide could be one of the most important things that we've done as a council.
All right, thank you everybody for all that information. A lot of effort went into that, and I appreciate it. The next question that we have is, now that ownership of the waterfront has been transferred to CWDI, what happens next? Will the city and the citizens have any input in what's going on?
Well, I guess I'll speak first with this because I'm a little less of an expert on CWDI than the mayor and Commissioner Roche's. But something that I will say is we noticed some opportunities. There was a lack of diversity with CWDI. There was also a lack of something seeming to be transparent or seemingly to be fair. And essentially all the concerns that we brought to CWDI, we're in a place now, where we're essentially on the same page. And I'm very optimistic, and I sincerely believe that those concerns will be addressed. I think something the citizens need to do at this one point is, they've received all the information that they wanted from the community as far as what direction to go, what decisions to make, and, as far as what type of businesses they want to see on the waterfront. So I really believe this is a time for the citizens to essentially trust the process. We encourage CWDI to have transparency, so the city and the community, will have an idea as far as what's going on. But this is CWDI's moment to shine. So I believe that we need to give them the trust and allow them to do what they've been incorporated to do.
Brian, if you want to.
Oh yeah. So it was actually one of our first big tests as a council, and I think under the leadership of the mayor and the commission president, they dug in as a part of this process, and I have either the fortunate or unfortunate aspect of I was the events coordinator at Salewinds Park after college. So I literally, part of my growing up experience was what we were going to do with the Salewinds property and how we were going to make it successful. but the rubber really met the road finally. And I think everyone is overwhelmingly excited. And at the end of the day, the slight delay that we put in place was really to accomplish the things that we saw as a council and that we heard from our constituents was missing. And one of the things was it just didn't seem in the plan that was proposed that legally anyone was held to adhere to what the citizens have been saying for 28 years. Like, it's been the same thing over and over and over again. And so what we did was we asked for the draft development plan, which incorporated the multitude of the large amount of green space along the waterfront, terminus of the streets to the water, the ability to either have a master plan or smaller scale developers, which is sometimes a healthier way to develop because you're not trying to bite everything off at one chew and the risk is lowered. Those things, the idea of actually having only shovel ready developers come forward, which was huge. And if you're not shovel ready, then we're not interested. And honestly, if you shovel ready means if you can't show progress in a certain amount of time, you may lose those development rights, because the citizens were very clear in their commentary with the latest study and other studies that they didn't want to see happen what happened with some prior developments, that we were all just kind of waiting back that someone was going to come into town and save Cambridge, and they do anything but. So I feel comfortable that what is now part of that agreement puts the legal restraints around it that the citizens in the city really needed to make sure that we had some legal mechanisms to make sure the development proceeded in the way that it needed to and the way that citizens had said that it was going to. So yeah, that's that. And then the one thing that's sort of an aside, and it just doesn't relate to CWDI, is that a major effort on behalf of not just this city but other places is a recognition that diversity and inclusion is something that we really need to address, and we need to address in a very progressive way. And sometimes it's hard to accomplish at face value. But one of the things that the mayor has tossed around is the creation, and he creates committees, by the way, I think legally, for anyone that wants to know, is maybe even the creation of something like a diversity and inclusion committee. And the concept there, though it would have to be hashed out, is that any time we ran into this, we would have citizen representatives that really could do the work to dig in and make sure that, okay, this group that doesn't look like they represent the city, have they really, dug in and done the work, and are they truly representative of the city? And it would be a backstop. It's like in any good government, you've got checks and balances. And sort of like the ethics committee is, they don't meet much, but when they do, it's an important component to know that a jury of your peers who are deciding whether the work's been done. And I think CWDI dug down and they basically said, look, we have really tried, and I think we were satisfied with that. But the ability to not have to react like we did as a council, but to have it built into the process of knowing that we're inclusive in all of our decisions, not just by doing community input consultant type projects, but actually every decision we make, we would have that backstop to say, let's just see what they think about this. So anyway, just tossing that out there.
So I think both the commission president and the commissioner from Ward 1 really hit on some good points. The agreement that was ultimately reached, it requires a lot of due diligence on the part of CWDI, and that was really the biggest thing that we want to ensure is that CWDI doesn't jump into any agreement with any individual company or developer or any component of this, but instead allows a developer or a group of developers the opportunity to make a bid on the project, but then also to ensure that bid is going to match what the citizen input has been for so long. Look, we've talked about the waterfront as the commissioner from Ward 1 said, for 3 decades, nearly as long as I've been alive, this has been a topic. And I think that it's really a very overwhelming thing that right now, with us in the positions we're in, this is when things have gone from the discussion to now we are moving into the actual development phases. And phase one's going to be a public RFP so that proposals from a developer can be received from multiple developers. And one thing that I think was important to build in, that was built in, is that there is going to be, once the proposals are received, a public review period where the names and the identifiers of the developers are redacted, so that you're not colored or a bit jaded perhaps by who the developer is, but you review what the proposal is, and you can provide public input. So from step one, we've been doing public studies, and now through the engagement of a developer, the public is going to remain informed and involved in providing input. And look, if there is a proposal, if there are 3 great proposals and it's a hard time for CWDI to determine which one to engage, then we're blessed. And if there's only 1 good proposal and 5 bad ones, then there won't be any rumors that they took a bad proposal or a less than good proposal, because the public will know that this was the one proposal that met the guidelines that were provided. So providing that public review phase, I think, is key to ensuring that everyone's going to know that the project, as it moves forward, is going to be moving forward in the most appropriate fashion. And one of the things that was talked about too was ethics requirements and conflict of interest reporting. And I think through this, CWDI agreed that it could be tightened up, and that's one of the things that the city has the opportunity to do that, and that's something we're going to do in addition to the diversity portion, which is a discussion that's going to be ongoing with the county, because CWDI was formed by MOU of the city and the county. So we're just in the next step of many steps. Through this, the city has appointments to the board. Through this, any developer is going to have to work with the city planning commission, the city planner, and the staff there. Any changes that require council approval, of course, come before the council. And look, through all this too, what our opinions are, what we see, what we feel, and what appears viable is going to run through the council as well. CWDI was formed to be apolitical, and that's a good thing, but they are ultimately an instrumentality of the mayor and council of the city of Cambridge to ensure that the project's done and done correctly. And as an instrumentality of this body, not of the members of the body, but of the body, their job is to ensure that this is done well, and we're going to continue to provide oversight for that, because we are going to ensure that this project is done right. You get one shot at this, and then you're going to determine the next century of waterfront. So let's get it right once, and let's not look at it in half a decade and go, man, we could have done much better there.
Thank you guys so much. What's the status on that fiscal year 22 budget? What is the biggest challenge, and how do citizens make their views known?
The biggest challenge is we don't have enough money. But we are really lucky in that the city staff has made it clear what their needs are. I think the budget process probably needs to be evolved and reviewed for next year moving forward. But the budget itself, I think we've identified some needs, and we're addressing those needs. And some of the biggest needs right now relate back to public safety in the city of Cambridge. But ultimately, the budget, because we provide services, the budget does not have a lot of movement right now, because we do have, as people know, a somewhat limited lack of resources. But it's something that I think, because we're making moves in the right direction, we're going to alleviate some of that, and it's going to give us the power to be more creative with budgets in years moving forward. Really, the biggest thing as far as citizen input is email, call, come to the meetings, public comment, call in. We had citizens come to the chambers for the first time in a very long time for our special budget meeting this past Monday night, where I was introduced. But ultimately, every time someone calls me and says, hey, I've got an issue with trash, or someone calls me and says, hey, I called the police and it took them 20 minutes to get there, or someone calls and says, hey, this street hasn't been paved in 25 or 30 years and it's cracking up, that all determines the budget, because that all ultimately is fixed through the budget. ultimately government comes down to, unfortunately, oftentimes money. And it's about how we can disperse or distribute things to best respond to the needs that exist. And also not just respond to those needs, but ensure that moving forward, rather than being reactive to them, we can be proactive and face the issues that exist prior to them becoming getting to a critical point.
All right, thank you. The next question is regarding the work group on the old City Hall building. What are you hoping that the citizen work group will come up with and hopefully accomplish?
So I guess I'll go with that one too, and then we can kind of branch out. So I think it's a bit of a misnomer to call it a citizen work group. Citizens are a component, but the work group is made up of the mayor, the commissioner for Ward 3, and the city engineer. It's made up of a representative from the Historic Preservation Commission, a representative from Cambridge Main Street, and a representative from Rescue Fire Company, and then 3 citizens as well that are going to be selected solely based upon their background and knowledge with regard to historic preservation, adaptive reuse, funding and fundraising for public projects of this nature. And the reason we're doing that is the same reason that the Technology Committee has these citizens and the Traffic and Safety Committee has the citizen members. It's because we've got talented people in the city of Cambridge. We've got really smart, really capable people who are either beginning their careers, they're in the middle of their careers are winding down, or they've retired from their careers, but they're experts in these areas. And they're not city staff. And I don't think that they would really have an interest in being city staff, but they see a need for particular issues to be addressed in the city of Cambridge. And so we're turning to these experts who really are just unbelievably capable. For this particular project, without naming names, I've had an individual that was involved in fundraising on the West Coast for some large public interests. I've had a developer who has a background in the city of Cambridge reach out, an architect that's been involved in the project for a very long time, people involved with construction firms. I mean, just some really, really talented people that have a depth of knowledge for this kind of specific project that's broader than the depth of knowledge that we may have in-house, that can deal with broader municipal issues, but that don't have that level of experience with specific historic preservation and repair. And the goal really is to get the building first stabilized, then restored, then occupied in some fashion, likely reoccupied by the city. But that's something that can evolve as well, but most likely get the city back in one location under one roof, working collaboratively together in a fully functioning fashion, but with the goal and the real drive being to do this in as affordable a fashion while respecting the needs, but also in as responsible a fashion with regard to the use of taxpayer funds. That's the big thing, and why I'm so interested in finding people with good grant writing and fundraising backgrounds, because we really hope to accomplish this with a minimal ask of the city budget, so that we can try to do this in a fashion that's going to be responsible, because we do have pressing needs that go beyond reoccupying that building, but we want to ensure that building's not lost, because it is totally unique on the Eastern Shore of Cambridge to have a city hall of that size, quality, and nature. Brian, and I will add that Commissioner Roche, I think, talked about this during his campaign as well, as something that was, in a list of priorities, was one thing that he acknowledged and felt was an important thing for the city, was ensuring that we don't lose that kind of a beautiful and historic place.
Yeah, just to add to that, the Economic Development Subcommittee had hired a consultant years ago, and one of the things they said is so important is that when people come, or even your citizens see an example of you taking care of a public space, that's important for them to know that you're vested in your city. And that building is dead center in the city of Cambridge, and everyone passes it at least once a day, I would say, or at least once a week. And to let that fall down is a real disservice to the taxpayers of the city. And for us to put that back into productive use, whatever that looks like, that is just so important for everyone to see. It is really the welcome mat and the faceplate for the city of Cambridge. So I'm excited for the project. It can be done, and I'm just glad that Mayor Bradshaw is taking the lead to pull in the people that really want to help and just cultivate that level of expertise to help us get it done in an affordable and beneficial way to the city. So thank you.
And all I would like to say about the former firehouse or city hall building, that's a very iconic building, just as iconic as a lighthouse. So it's extremely important that that we put our best people on this project so we can bring that back to life again.
Thank you, guys. How do we break what Pat Escher accurately called a business of poverty, where slumlords can just walk away from their worst derelict properties and accumulated unpaid fines?
Well, I'll answer this question. I think the best way for us to address this is we do not allow them to do business in our city. They can live here, they can shop here, but if you're going to be a so-called quote unquote slumlord, if you're not going to take care of your properties, if you're going to abandon your properties, then the city actually has a right to decide if we're going to provide you a rental license to continue to do business here. So that's a straight to the point answer for that question.
And I'd like to add to that. One of the things that research shows is that when you build new housing, particularly new housing that's affordable or market rate, you have to be careful that you're not abandoning the old in preference for the new. So what's interesting about that is this council has a wonderful report in front of them called the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan that gives us specific action items that the Housing Task Force, I believe, is also looking at that. And certainly the council has read it and wants to implement some things to make sure that we are not divesting of investment in our historic neighborhoods to their detriment just because we're getting new housing. We don't want what was called the donut hole historically, where your city empties out of investment, which this is not unique to Cambridge. It happened to so many cities, but that we actually are turning back in, and where we have water, where we have sewer, where we have housing that just needs to be rehabbed, that we're actually investing in that in the best way possible. And that's what that neighborhood revitalization report has given us very specific steps to take, not going into detail there. The business of poverty is something too that, to bring up this subcommittee again, looked into. And one of the real issues, I actually had a problem in my ward. It was really the first action of business I had, where there had been a gentleman placed in an apartment building that he definitely, it's one of those, so I guess the way that it was explained to me is that this particular individual kind of fell through the cracks. Like, you have people that need very high-end mental health services, and then you have people that actually can function to some level if provided an environment where their rent's paid for and they just basically are checked in occasionally or whatever, and they can be just fine. Well, this particular individual kind of fell through the cracks. So I had a dialogue with an out-of-town agency that had placed this individual. And on one hand, I felt like, the citizens in the neighborhood were very concerned because the particular person that was wandering the streets in the middle of the winter, half clothed, knocking on people's doors, they were honestly genuinely concerned about his well-being. So to me, the business of poverty can also be, are the agencies that are providing the services, one, are they equipped? And two, are they actually not doing are they not able to act in the best interest of the customers that they're serving? And this particular individual, from what I understand, actually did need mental health services, and they were going to work towards that. So we have to make sure that, and this particular individual too had been in a number of communities prior to landing in Cambridge. So the assumption is that, we'll just put him in Cambridge. And that is of absolutely no service to this particular individual. And I worry sometimes that it's the tip of the iceberg on stressing our services that we provide here to the detriment of the tax base and to the detriment of the individuals that aren't being served properly. And there's no blame here. It's just really, I think it's worth a look and an examination by interviewing our police department and our other service agencies on, is there anything that we can do to prevent this type of thing from happening? Because clearly the process may be broken, or at least in need of a little bit of refinement, so that the best outcome for the city, the best outcome for the individuals that the assistive services are able to create or able to provide, and everyone is being optimally functional. And the other thing, and I'm not supposed to be long-winded here, is that I have a classmate that started a program out in the city of Seattle where they found, and we've heard about this, that fire department responds to certain things, EMS responds to certain things, police department responds to certain things, social services responds to certain things, and what they found is that 40% of 911 calls were people that just didn't know who to call. So they may need a prescription filled. They may need, the list goes on. And what they've done is they've thought differently about the approach that our traditional siloed response has. And they actually specially trained particular divisions where the reason you do this is it saves time and effort on behalf of the police department. It saves time, effort, and money on behalf of the fire department. It saves time and effort on behalf of EMS, where if you just have specially trained groups that can actually respond to those "I just don't know what to do" problem, you can save time, money, and better serve your citizens. And this is a very, very novel concept, but it's some of the things that I get excited about, because I'm like, all right, clearly we're just dumping money at a problem is not always a solution. Let's see if we can rethink it a little bit. And there's some very good ideas and things that we can hopefully address. And this is relevant to the idea of poverty, because typically people that are in, have that situation, they lack resources to do what they need to have the best life. And to maybe rethink that, that's probably not term one for us. We're just trying to get the wheels back on the bus. But I would love to just have that dialogue. And sadly, it probably needs another committee the mayor's going to have to form. But I guarantee we have lots of smart people that could help us look at some of these things in a different way, because our society's evolving. It's changing. It's getting older. It's, the demographics are different. And for us to be pioneers in that space would just be awesome. And it makes for good press too.
Yeah. And we do like good press here in Cambridge.
Right.
But so I guess back to the crux of the question, a business of poverty and that kind of thing. I think a big part of it is ensuring that you've got quality living conditions, because poverty is a continuous cycle. When you don't have good living conditions, you don't have access to education, and you don't have hope of exiting that poverty. That cycle continues when you feel that when a community feels that is what their lot in life is. And one of the things I've talked about in some meetings I've had as of late regards doing some alternative things with regard to education and trying to find ways to engage kids in a way that's a bit creative, because the idea is to get beyond the classic classroom model that might not work for some kids, and get to the point where we can get these people engaged and out in the park, or out in public, or out a farming program. All these things that give a different aspect or a different exposure of what life is, and that's part of escaping that, I think. And I think that also goes into breaking that cycle of poverty and breaking this business of poverty. But even going further with the business of poverty, getting back to the tiered licensing, getting back to having requirements that licensing be contingent upon the house being to a certain livability standard. These things all help break that cycle as well, because the business of poverty exists in part, not in totality, but in part in our community, because it is easier to make money off of failing to maintain property than it is to make money off of improving that property and moving forward that community as a whole. It is easier for certain landlords in certain communities to continue to collect a low rent check than to make an investment in the property and see that rent check increase. And so because of that ease, and because we've allowed that cycle for 40 or 50 or 60 years, I mean, going back to the election, a lot of discussion about the 1969 housing survey that was completed. and the things sound the same, and they sound the same because there's not been an effort made and an imposition upon the landlords to improve the quality of living that they do provide. And it does draw those that are unable to find or are unable to afford other living opportunities. And we certainly don't want to turn away those who are down on their luck or have had difficulties in life or are of a lower education level, but we also have to ensure that we're taking care of our own before we turn to taking care of those from other communities. We've really got to take care of Cambridge, and that hasn't happened, I don't think, for a long time.
All right, thank you. The county has adopted a sound policy about not interfering with the use and enjoyment of neighborhoods. Any thoughts about that for the city, and would enforcement be an obstacle?
I'll go first. I'm a little biased when it comes to sound. It may not be good for me to give an opinion, but living in different cities and, I love sound. To me, sound is like music. It's beautiful. It shows there's culture. It shows life that's going on around you. So I'm not totally familiar about the sound policy, but that the county has adopted. But I can tell you, as far as on a city level, I do essentially believe that when it's time to go to bed, all the unnecessary sounds, noise, and music, there should be a respectful level. Do I see now, if we were to adopt something like that, do I see enforcement being an obstacle? I think if we have the right technologies, I guess to determine what's loud, what's too loud, if we actually know what that number is, that decibel number is, I don't see it difficult to be, and I don't see it being an obstacle, but I think it's important to be fair. So.
Yeah, I actually had a complaint about sound, a very legitimate complaint. And from my standpoint, the concern is to find the balance between a lively city where lots is going on, to Council President Cephas's point, it shows liveliness, it shows activity, it shows fun, and then versus someone that is clearly being a nuisance to neighbors. And then you hear that a bunch of people have bought homes and they're like, oh my God, we've made a mistake by moving to Cambridge because we've complained about this. It's clearly obnoxious, and it's we can't. So in this country, our freedoms are founded on the fact that we can do whatever we want as long as it doesn't infringe upon the rights of others to enjoy their life. So that's the line you have to find. And I think to Commissioner President Cephas's point, most times the police department carries around a decibel meter, or they should if they don't have one. They're fairly low cost, and we define what that is. And once that's defined, if it's in excess of that, without a special event permit or something like that, then they have every right to enforce that. And then how do you enforce that? Well, that to me is probably one of those things that goes along with tiered licensing, because someone that actually owns their home a lot of times is interested in making sure that their neighborhood and their neighbors are happy. Sadly, someone that's just there temporarily is usually the person that doesn't care. And I don't want to stereotype too much, but that then would fall back on the fact that if a landlord knows they've got a tenant that's annoying the heck out of the neighbors and the cops have been called 3 times, we should know that, and we should be able to take action on it, because it's really not fair for the neighbors from that standpoint if it's out of control. And what out of control is usually pretty easy to identify. I think we all can agree that if it's just the person's not listening, they're not turning something down, or they're doing something that's just, for lack of a better word, obnoxious, then there should be legal mechanisms and enforcement mechanisms to have people act so that everyone can enjoy it, not by bringing down the hammer on having a backyard party. I mean, I get that, but at the same time, if someone's just locked up in their garage, just blasting music and it's vibrating the windows 4 houses down, that's a different story. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I found out and looking through the Code of Ordinances that the city of Cambridge didn't really have what I would call an enforceable sound ordinance or noise ordinance. It's really amazing to me. I think that, so we've had commissioners talking about what to introduce and what it should look like, and it's been evolving, and it's been introduced and pulled a couple of times because of some considerations. But I think that ultimately we are going to have to make a move on this, and we're going to have to be really cognizant of how we handle it. How things are addressed in residential neighborhoods need to look different than how they're addressed in commercial areas versus industrial areas versus the Route 50 corridor. You know, there's a lot of diversity of use in the city of Cambridge, and we've got to ensure that we don't try to fit a one-size-fits-all policy. But we also can't have a policy that's so disjointed that it's not enforceable, and that's really the difficulty, and that's what we've got to address, and we've got to ensure. The other thing we've got to ensure is that we don't enter into a policy like some other jurisdictions have done that is so restrictive that it leads to economic harm. You know, we've got to address the needs and the comfort level of those that reside in the city, but at the same time, we can't go and in the process harm some of our longstanding businesses or businesses that may want to locate here in the future. The balance exists, and I'm not going to form a committee for it. We've got enough committees for issue-specific things at the moment. We'll form some more, but I'll tell you what we will do. We will, once we get through the budget season, I think, probably have to make this part of a work session as part of a broader, I think, quality of life work session that we may hold about quality of life issues in the city. And noise levels are one of those quality of life issues that impact residents who are either have chosen to live here or are from here or have just moved here or have resided here for decades. So.
The marina, can the systemic problems be addressed?
We lost you there for a minute, Marcus. Can you repeat that, please?
Sorry, guys. It says, let's talk the marina. Can the systemic problems be addressed?
Ward 1.
Oh, is everything? And it looks like people are freezing up, and sound is a problem. But I believe there's an actual marina group. And the other thing that's interesting to me is that Oasis, from what I understand, is just taken over the management of the Hyatt. And what's fascinating about that is I sort of inquired why that would be. And the reason you do that is because the city had some very capable staff that I think ended up being employed by Oasis. But we have to have a recognition that city's primary function is to provide water, sewer. It's arguable that they should be providing trash pickup at some level, public safety and some other things, and that they're not the best at running marinas. So why would you want to duplicate? There's incredibly complex insurance requirements. There's incredibly complex marketing requirements. The reach of actually understanding what it takes to do that is important. So I think the decision to have a third-party entity take care of the marina was actually a smart move, because I have to believe that the Hyatt Corporation, if they understand that they're not the best at running a marina, that their job is to run a hotel and that marina will just feed that hotel people, I think we as a city probably need to continue to work with a third party to feed us customers, which is why we have that marina at the end of the day. Sounds kind of shallow, but shallow water. But anyway, that's one of the systemic problems of the marina. But I do, it's funny to me, people ask, well, what's going on with this, that, and the other in marina? And honestly, I wish I knew more. I do know that the electric has been upgraded, I believe, to accommodate different vessels. I do believe that they're resizing some of the slips. None of this happens immediately. But what's neat about that is that actually is an organization that's trying to adapt to problems that have been brought forth. And I believe those have been two problems that were from the beginning, is the slips were oversized. They weren't deep enough other than the wave action, and then maybe just electric, and just constantly upgrading to make sure that it's a proper facility for boaters to come here. So if there's any specific things, I'm not fully aware, other than I had the citizen complained about an insurance requirement, which a lot of times insurance requirements come from insurance companies. And as a businessman, I hate it. It's one of the, just like taxes, it's one of the necessary evils of doing business. Insurance and taxes, they kind of go hand in hand. And then lawyers.
I don't mean to impose, Brian, but it appears that we are out of time. We're going to have to continue the discussion on Town Hall in July. I believe July 7th is the date. We'll be back to discuss things moving forward. We will have with us myself, of course, as well as Commissioners Harrington and, well, looks like Roche again on the schedule. So,
oh yeah, that might be
up
shuffled.
right
Yeah.
here. And I just want to thank you for practicing your dad jokes on all of us for right before Casey gives birth. So congratulations to Brian. He'll be a dad in the next few days here. But thanks everyone for coming on, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks.
You.